have the betting tips coming up for you live here on the show. Governor Mike Huckabee is here. Governor, have you ever bet on a horse? Do you have any tips?
You know, I've never bet on a horse, but I've got the inside scoop on who's going to win Belmont today.
You do?
Yeah, I can tell you. The fastest horse.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, that's who's going to win.
That's brilliant.
So if you just bet on the fastest horse, you're going to clean up.
So that would be California Chrome.
Well, maybe. I don't know.
The longest
Don't know much about it.
So we've got some brand new developments, some new facts to add to the controversy surrounding the release of Bo Bergdahl from captivity in exchange for 5 terrorist prisoners. We now know, according to reporting by the Fox News Channel, that the president's top military advisors advised him directly against this. Here's the quote. Senior military officials had advised President Obama not to make the Taliban for Bergdahl trade, likening it to, quote, handing over 5 4-star generals of the Taliban. Does that surprise you?
In a way, it doesn't. It disgusts me, but it doesn't surprise me. This president has never listened to his top military advisors. Let's take a sort of a big picture look. The president of the United States is a civilian. And our military is designed to be run basically by civilians so that you don't have a military takeover. You don't have a military-run government. That was intentional on the part of our founders. But I don't think they ever imagined that there would be a president who didn't listen to the military and work in cooperation and partnership. I would put it this way. If this were the 1950s and we were going to create a television show about the president, we would call it Obama Knows Best, because that's the way he has approached his presidency. He knows more than even the people who have been shot at. That just is amazing to me.
General Jack Keane talking with Megyn Kelly last night on that particular issue about there's a laundry list of generals and top military officials that the president hasn't listened to. Take a listen to the general.
Here's the issue. General McChrystal, General Petraeus, General Alston, and General Allen, and now General Dunford, have all made recommendations to this administration on war policy issues in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the president has rejected summarily every single one of them, dealing with force levels, residual forces, etc. It doesn't surprise me that on an issue as contentious as this is, particularly the generals are close to the fight in the theater, made a recommendation that we should not make this trade and provided the rationale for it, and that was ignored and rejected, as has all of their other recommendations over the past 4 to 5 years.
Isn't that one of the best ways to tell a good president is to see who they surround themselves with and that they will listen to sound advice when they know best?
Well, and you want to have people around you who will tell you the truth and disagree with you. President Obama surrounds himself with people who not only won't disagree, but they steer him. I mean, I wonder, who do you think maybe knows more about national security and the military? Valerie Jarrett? Or a 4-star general who's gone through the War College at West Point, who's been in combat, who has led troops, who has worked his way up the ranks from 2nd lieutenant to 4-star general? Who do you think might know a little more about that? This is an arrogant administration, and this is one more ridiculous example of it.
What do you make of the president and also members of the president's staff coming out and doubling down on their comments this week, basically sticking by the decision to bring Bo Bergdahl home, the way in which they did it, the Rose Garden ceremony, and then Susan Rice coming out when she made her honor, that he served with honor and distinction. This week she was asked about it, and she doubled down on this. Take a listen.
I realize there's been a lot of discussion and controversy around this, but what I was referring to is the fact that this was a young man who volunteered to serve his country in uniform at a time of war. That is itself a very honorable thing.
Really? Because Nadel Hassan actually fits the same description.
Yeah.
Who shot up Fort Hood.
Well, there's another issue to think about. You know, there's, in fact, the young man that you had on from the junior ROTC knows a lot more about how the military is supposed to operate than apparently anybody in this administration sitting at the White House making these decisions. But there are military decisions, there are national security decisions, and then there are political decisions. This was driven by politics, not by interest of national security, not by interest of what's best for the military. This was driven in order that President Obama could have a nice political moment of saying, I rescued a soldier. And after all these bad VA stories, he needed to change the narrative of his position as commander-in-chief. Unfortunately, this cigar blew up in his face.
Yeah, so don't listen to the real people who have served with honor and distinction. Just let Susan Rice go say that somebody served with honor and distinction.
And of all the people I would trot out there to defend the administration, the last person would be Susan Rice, whose credibility was shattered after the Benghazi situation when she went out and made the ridiculous claim about the video.
What did you make of this New York Times? There's been a couple of New York Times pieces over the past week, opinion pieces, basically laying claim to this idea that it was the platoon's fault. That we knew that this guy, Bo Bergdahl, he liked to kind of walk among the roses, and he would be out there, and he would sometimes he would wander off, and that was okay, that's who he was. But it was really the platoon's fault for him having deserted. What did you make of that?
Well, I tell you, I have it on good authority that what really happened was this kid had been reading the New York Times, and that's what made him, kind of go over. There's a reason that even the Chinese government refuses to allow you to access the New York Times in China, because they have an understanding that there's certain things they'll let you see, but they don't want to let you see things that are so subversive that it's even too much for the Chinese government.
So we interviewed Jordan Vaughn, who was an enlisted man who served with Bo Bergdahl in Afghanistan, and asked him, what do you make of the attacks from the left against you and your credibility, blaming you for his desertion? And here's what he said.
I think it's a pretty outrageous claim to kind of pretend that all these, first-person sources and everyone that was there is just not credible. We're guys that served for the country in Afghanistan, and then to just now say that we're not credible sources after our service and looking for this guy that they're now, lauding his return, it's an outrageous claim. He made the choice to join the Army. He went to Afghanistan. That's great. But you can't just look at what you're currently doing. You have to look back, and looking back, he left the unit. He abandoned the post, he deserted. It was not at all with honor and distinction, and it's an insult to say that to everyone who did go over there and serve their time.
And we heard from other platoon mates who said, politics aside, it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat, you have an American flag on your shoulder, and we're one and the same while we're out there. How do you respond?
I think it's important. Tonight, one of the guests on our show is going to be Major Rusty Bradley. He was part of the overall group that went out and looked for him and headed up that operation. And I think that a lot of these soldiers are very frustrated. But look, they would still go get Bo Bergdahl, even if he were a deserter, because he's still an American, and he deserves that level of respect. But the bigger question, the one that to me overrides everything else, is do you trade him for 5 incredibly bad terrorists who have murdered thousands of people?
And they want to continue doing it.
Yeah, these guys weren't in Gitmo for stealing bicycles. Right. They were in Gitmo as the baddest of the bad, and they are essentially going to run around in Qatar, and then, nobody's really monitoring them. Nobody's keeping an eye on them. They're going to be right back in the fight before we know it. And I just can't imagine what the president was thinking, who advised him, and how he couldn't see that this was going to be an absolute unmitigated disaster.
Great point. And the governor will be back with more great points, as we're going to keep you around for our next block in just a moment. Pressure on you now, Governor.
Yeah, big pressure.
But first, we got some news.